In this week's video, I'm going to show you just how easy it is to change the shutter speed, aperture and ISO on a Canon mirrorless camera just like this one, so you can be a more creative photographer and take better photos. Welcome to the Photo Genius channel. Hi, Paul here from Photo Genius. In this video, a beginner's look at how to adjust aperture, shutter and ISO on a Canon mirrorless camera. I'll also be sharing my recommended camera settings to get you started. Now to begin with, we're going to need to make sure that we don't have the camera set to the auto mode. Now this is because in the auto mode, the camera's doing all the work for you and all the decision making on your behalf. And you cannot adjust camera settings in the auto mode. Now this means you can't be creative with your camera, and I think we can do a lot better than that. So for this tutorial, make sure you have the camera's mode dial set to M for manual. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's talk about aperture, shutter and ISO, all of which are clearly displayed on the screen on the back of the camera. Now if your screen display looks different to mine, then locate the info button on the camera. Using this, you can cycle through the different display options, and for me, I highly recommend making this your default screen as your battery will last longer. This is because the live view feature is turned off, plus you can clearly see all of the camera settings without any distractions. Okay, so as promised, how to adjust aperture, shutter and ISO, which is where we're going to begin. Look for a button marked ISO. This is on the top of the camera I'm using, but it may be different on your camera. For example, on the Canon R100 and R10, it's on the back of the camera. Press the button and the ISO range is displayed on the screen. To adjust, simply turn the dial on the top of the camera. To lock in a setting, either press the set button or you can press the shutter button halfway down. Now the ISO range will vary camera to camera, the lowest being usually around about 100, but how much you can increase it by will depend on the camera you have. For example, the R50, the highest ISO is 32,000, but if you have the R7, then you should be able to increase it as far as 51,200, and significantly higher again if you have the R6 Mark II. So what do the numbers actually mean? Well, in layman's terms, the higher the ISO, the brighter your image will be. And of course, the lower the ISO, the darker your image will be. So adjusting the ISO can be a useful way of adjusting how bright or dark an image will be. But there is something you should keep in mind when making adjustments. Increasing the ISO does come at a price. At some point you will start to notice your images may look soft and grainy, and we call this digital noise. So my recommendation is, as a default setting, aim to keep the ISO fairly low, around about 200 to 400, but don't let that put you off using it. It is there for a reason, and chances are you're going to need to increase the ISO at times. Now for a deeper dive into ISO and how to get the most from it, consider watching this video next, link below. Okay, so next up is aperture. Now this one is interesting because aperture is not actually a camera feature at all, and that's because you will find it located in the lens. An aperture is simply an opening in the lens that you can adjust, and this allows you to control how much light can pass through the lens. Now a good analogy is to compare aperture to the pupil of your eye. To adjust the aperture on this camera, I'm going to first use the up button. This is also marked with a plus/minus symbol. Now pressing this, you will see an orange marker appear next to the F number. So now I can turn the dial to adjust the aperture value. Dial to the right for a larger F number, and of course dial to the left for a smaller F number. Now larger cameras like the R10 usually have a second dial that you can use to adjust the aperture value, no button pushing required. Now the numbers can be confusing because while you may think a smaller F number would mean a smaller aperture, the opposite is actually true. The smaller the number, the wider and larger the aperture will be, and this will let more light pass through the lens. And likewise, the bigger the F number, the smaller the aperture, which of course means less light can now pass through the lens. Confusing, I know, but with practice you'll get used to the numbers. It's also worth mentioning that aperture will affect how in or out of focus backgrounds and foregrounds are. This is called depth of field. There's a link in the description below if you wish to know more. Okay, so we now know how to change the ISO and the aperture. That means we've got two ways that we can adjust the exposure, how bright or how dark our images are. But there is one more, and this is the big one, shutter speed. Now changing the shutter speed is actually very easy, but before we get to that, let's first take a look at what the shutter speed is and how we can use it and how it will affect our pictures. So think of the shutter a bit like a door that sits behind the lens. It's closed until the moment you press the shutter button all the way down. It then opens and closes again. Now whilst it's open, the camera's sensor is able to record light. The longer the shutter is open, the more time the camera has to record light, and of course the faster the shutter opens and closes, the less time the camera has to record light. So typically we often refer to shutter speeds as being either fast or slow, and to change the shutter speed on your camera is very easy. All you do is turn the main dial on the top of the camera to adjust the shutter speed. Dial to the right to increase the shutter speed, and turn the dial to the left if you wish to select a slower shutter speed. I used a slow shutter speed of 1/4 of a second to capture this image, taken just a few minutes before the sun rose over the horizon. Note, a tripod was used to keep the camera from moving whilst the shutter was open. Mid-afternoon and a very wide aperture, so a faster shutter speed of 1/500th of a second, and for this image a much faster shutter speed, 3200th of a second, captures this fast moving plane. Now when using very slow shutter speeds, we often use the term long exposure photography, and this can be really great for taking photos in very poor light or at night. For example, again using a tripod, this image of Brisbane City I captured with a shutter speed of 30 seconds. Okay, so here's a quick recap. Now to adjust the ISO, locate and press the ISO button and then turn the dial to adjust. Larger cameras like the R6 Mark II have 3 dials, so no ISO button needed. Aperture is a lens feature and we can adjust it using the camera. Now this may be a dial on some larger cameras, but on the smaller cameras use the plus/minus button to toggle between shutter and aperture. If you're watching this and you're using a DSLR camera, hold the AV button down and turn the dial. And shutter speed. Often this is what we adjust the most, so by default on almost all cameras the dial on the top of the camera will adjust the shutter speed without the need to press any buttons at all. So now the next step is to learn about the camera's light meter, so you can find a balance between the aperture, shutter and ISO. So make sure you watch this video next. You will find a link up here, but I'll also put one in the video description down below. So I really hope you've enjoyed this week's video and you picked up some great tips. If you did, please consider clicking on the like button. You'll find it down here. It helps the videos get noticed and that means the world to me. So until next time, see ya. Bye.